design system. Well, who has not yet heard the term design system? I mean, I guess there's Jeremy this morning, and probably you have read some stuff on the conference list. But it's fascinating how so much content is created every day almost about design system. And I kind of wonder, like, for people who kind of enter the field now, there's so much, it's overwhelming. Today, it really feels like there's things that you have or you have to do in order to have a design system. And it kind of becomes like a checklist. A checklist like things like, oops, pointing there, having a cool name, right? Because we all want to brainstorm 4 weeks on the name, maybe 1 month do some user research. Setting up tokens as well. You gotta have your foundations right? Having a dedicated team as well. A dedicated system manager, scaling up the team, and obviously open source it. But you see, the problem with checklists is sometimes taking things off the list becomes more important than doing the things themselves, or even why we're doing them. And so at my company that was introduced, we've been having a design system for 8 years. We've survived 3 technical upgrades, 2 design tool migration, and essentially, we have none of that. Well, I'm here, I don't know. No, I'm still here. But I guess today, really what I want to share is how we've survived 8 years, but not necessarily doing the right thing with the checklist, not this, but doing the things that worked for us and what we learned along the journey. And so before I dive into all this, maybe just to give you, I'm just in front of my character or something. Oh. So before I dive into all this, I'd just like to share a bit of context on what I do at what my company does. So voila. So we work in corporate investment banking. So very often our interfaces are quite complex, can be things like that. So this is a foreign exchange trading tool. So when you go on holiday, you want to buy euro, dollar. So this is what a professional would use. So they'll see all the prices, they'll see it both ways, they'll see very advanced financial instruments. So that's what they need to see. We also have a lot of tools like analytics for rates, for basically volatility, things in the market. We also make things much more, I would say, a bit more standard, such as this kind of website, which is where our clients go to get views on the markets, on macroeconomics, but also analysis on companies. And essentially today we have around 130 services on our B2B platform, and they all use the same design system. And it wasn't easy because, but I think I learned a few things from Jeremy's talk, so I will try to feed that in, because I've definitely heard people say things like, we are unique, can't use it. Or we move too fast, sorry. Or I prefer blue. I mean, I don't really get that much too much now, but still. Or users are different, that I've heard a lot. Or why should I check my work with you? Are you the design police? And also, sadly, who are you? That doesn't happen so much anymore, but yeah. But that's on the project side. On the design side, Jeremy, this is for you. What about creativity? Skilling my, inner artist. I can't practice my art. Oh, well, it's boring. Can I have a greenfield project? So, I can't really go to those people and say, sorry, you have, what was the mode? The 2 modes, the imperative. I can't go to them and say, sorry, you have an imperative mindset. That's not a good start, right? So how did we do over 8 years to kind of deal with all this? Essentially, that's my talk today. And the 3 themes I'd like to touch on today is adapt for adoption, how we made it to survive 8 years, embedding your goals, the organization goals, into yours, and also changing along the way. And for each, theme, I'll share some examples of how we've done it and how we're still doing it today. All right, so adoption. Obviously, when we start a design system, we're very excited. We want everyone to be as excited as we are. So the first thing usually is trying to find a cool name to kind of rally everyone around us. And that's something we actually did not intentionally. Let me explain. Because it is true, what's in the name is great because then you can build some sense of identity. You can do also a bit of branding. It's nice for hiring, you can talk about it. And let's face it, who doesn't like swag, right? can have branding stuff, really cool. But I would argue, because in everything, there's always pros and cons, right? So what would be the flip side of the coin? This is a very lousy animation, but Cassie will talk about CSS animation right after me, so she will teach you how to make a better one, because mine is just a PowerPoint one. Yeah, because when you say identity, it's also exclusion. You're gonna exclude people from that. If you say branding, that means you want to distinguish yourself from the rest of the organization. And swag, well, they're great, but they're just artifacts. And we don't want people to focus on the artifacts, on who they are. I often joke that even giving it a name, it really feels like, oh, it's their design system. It's Morgane's design system, which is not my design system, but that's what kind of applies giving it a name. And so for us, we really didn't want to focus about the tool. We didn't want to focus on all this. We wanted to focus on using those guidelines, the reusable assets. We wanted people to understand that when they use the design system, they are part of a bigger whole. And therefore, this is why they don't get to choose the color of the buttons or things like that. Because if they understand they're part of the bigger whole, then they will not want to negotiate color buttons, for example. So today, our design system is very not creatively named Societe Generale design system. But we really want people to understand that we do have a thing that is called a design system, reusable, asset, guidelines, both in code and in design, blah, blah, blah. But this is just how we work, and that's it. It's a bit like, would you rebrand your HR department? Probably not. But if you hire someone, you have to go through the HR process. You're not going to go through whatever name process that HR would make. Although I think I've seen that happen once. But yeah, so all this to say that, this is why we had to give up having a cool names. And to me, the biggest mistake that people do when they try to manage higher up or kind of manage stakeholders is not articulating the value that the thing brings to them. So adoption, it's not about us, it is what's in it for them. And failing to adapt the conversation, I think it's where, again, as I said, things make sense for us, maybe not for them. And we are sometimes very victim of our expert mindset. Maybe to illustrate this, I'll share how we actually dealt with adoption 8 years ago when we started to have a design system. I'm conscious that the text is going to be small, but I think the doodles are actually also in the little zine that you have, which is this page. So you can read it there as well. Little plug for Zero Height here. But yeah, so essentially we had project managers, designers, developers, design head, program head, business head. And you wouldn't go to them with the same arguments. So for example, project managers, usually they are responsible of budgets and roadmaps. So really what they would care about is how can you do more with less? Design system help in that. Designers, well, as much as they probably enjoy spending time in their prototypes, they do also enjoy having an understanding of which guidelines you should use, for example, which type of button. Developers, we used to have so many fights between designers and developers about not sharing the same language because the designer would be like, it's off by 10 pixels, and the developer is like, margin, padding, pixels, not having the same referential, right? For me, and I can say that I do care about consistency, but probably not the other ones. I mean, yeah, I would care about this, but I am conscious that it's probably not the first focus for everyone else. Program heads, well, maintainability, because when we have to implement a change, and especially in a big organization, they will have to go to each project, implement this change. Guess what? Design system can help. You can just change the design system. It's replicated everywhere. And for business head, actually, I found that the best argument for them was actually talking about familiarity with the brand. Because in the past, we had so many different development teams doing different things. It all looked different. And at some point, clients will notice and complain. And actually, that was actually a real complaint from clients. So they will care about this. So yeah, and I should say as well, depending where you are in the adoption cycle, I guess the efforts will change as well. I remember at the beginning, we spent lots of time targeting the program heads and the business heads. But once we got the green light, we shifted our focus to designers and developers because they're the ones who actually have to use it. So again, adoption is not about us, it's what's in it for them. And although we did that 8 years ago, and I guess maybe that's maybe something that we're not that conscious of is that's all the time. You never stop pitching about design system. I'm going to share now an example that we had more recently, which is how we got buy-in to work 3 months on adaptive colors. So you've seen in the intro, we have very, very complex screens. Sometimes we have 4 layers of information hierarchy, and, well, gray on gray on gray. It's not great for accessibility and contrast ratios. And the thing is, we didn't want to solve that at each project because this is just not scalable and not sustainable, or we will end up being a support hotline for the whole of the group, which is really not sustainable. So we really wanted to target that at the system level. But how you justify spending 3 months on color when there's so much more to do and so many more urgent topics to do? Well, actually, I remember, and I saved that email, it's still in my folder. One day, I saw this email, which is basically a salesperson was complaining that their clients couldn't see the price because it was so gray on gray that they were complaining that it was hard to read. Believe me, I copy-pasted this everywhere. I was like, look, we need to solve that because this is just one trading application. Can you imagine? Well, all the other applications, nobody can see prices. And I actually never mentioned accessibility once, I think, when I talked about the problem. The problem is people are having trouble reading things on screens. We have to fix it at the system level. Otherwise, you have to pay everyone else to fix at each local level, which is, again, not sustainable. And I guess this is, another illustration of when we are victim of our expert mindset. I could have gone and find all the articles and accessibility and everything. Yeah, that's great for us. But when you have to pitch higher up, you have to pitch why we're doing it, and you don't necessarily have to drag in all the technical term or more like the technical jargon. If you ever work with other people who are not designers and developers, although sometimes developers also have the jargon, I'm sure you know how people feel when you're in a room and you don't understand anything that people say. You don't want to know more about what they say. You're just like, okay, it's not for me. You shut off, and that's all. You move on. So that's why we have to adapt. And to conclude on adaptive color, and it's kind of funny because basically what it means is today our colors, they adapt depending on the level, depending on what they are, and depending on what they are on. So this is, for example, how warning will adapt. And so another illustration is like in the same, I'd say, UI elements, we'll have different color depending, on, again, the nature of what it is and the text sizes, for example. Which means that our high-fidelity mockups or prototypes in Figma, they're not high fidelity anymore. We had to give away control or the illusion of control of what we thought that we were controlling colors on the screen. So to wrap up on this first section, whether it's like sharing screenshots of emails around, taking screenshots of very upset people, that do work. And if that's what you need to do for adoption, and you have to continue to do it after your initial adoption. I'm going to move on to embedding your odds goals in your projects. So very often, and I think I touched a little bit on this, is like we tend to be in a tech bubble because obviously we want to share with people who are like with you. The thing is, and it's great, right? Because we can share our experience. I guess this is the reason why I'm here today. But the thing is, there's also people who work at the company, and we actually do need to spend time with them to understand their struggles and what they want to do. And for us to be taken seriously, we have to remember that every interaction with those stakeholders are really an opportunity to pitch our value in the context of their goals. What does it mean? So like Jeremy, I'm going to use the button. We do have buttons, yes, but actually people don't really care about buttons, even less our top executives. In the bank, we have lots of data, as you have seen in my previous screenshots. So maybe the more meaty components are more like our pickers, because we have so many pickers, and date picker, so many date picker. And I think some people go, oh my God. And you think it's easy, it's not, especially in finance because like you have to think about open business days, then the range, does it start, does it end? Oh my God, endless study here. But this is useful. This used to cost a lot for each project to replicate. Then my question is, when do we stop? We have buttons, then we have components. Where do we stop in this kind of systemic way of thinking things and addressing problems? I could argue that, because I've been in my company for quite a long time now, that 90% of what we do is somehow related to that. Dashboards, forms, workflows, and reports. And sure, behind the underlying, the assets, it's all different, the business is different, but the user interaction, more or less 90%, the bucket is around here. So once we have components, we have patterns, we maybe have layers, can we do more? And over time, what we tried and we're building is kind of what we call business design patterns. It's reusable, the same way we use reusable solutions for UI patterns, so we use reusable solutions for business use cases. All right, I see a lot of eyes who are like, so I have an example for you. I don't know if anyone has heard about a FYI check process. No? No one? Oh, okay. A FYI check is something we have a lot in finance, which is when you have something sensitive, such as transferring lots of money and, I don't know, managing a huge risk threshold, one person is not enough. There needs to be a validation for another person. We call it another pair of eyes, hence FYI check, than the original user. And we have it in a lot. It can be in a trading tool. It can be in a cash management tool. It can be in a risk tool. So we have it a lot across all our services. And so for this pattern to work, we need to show the risky area of the content, highlight the error raised by the validators, and allow users to input their own decision. So visually, that could look something like this. So as you can see here, on the left, we have the content, and we have some warnings, the comments, the audit trail, and validation. And it's kind of like taking this away. And obviously, this is the visual part of it, so I'll show you the visual part of it, but you can think as well of things like what constitutes a validation. Is that something from your colleague? Does it have to be your manager? Does it have to be a third party? All this, but here I'll show you the visual part of it. It's kind of taking this and poof, putting it into another service. So this is a transaction tool where you have operation details here, a get, audit trail here, and action at the bottom. So for us, really, business pattern, the way we think about it is that allows us really to design systematically. Because when we reuse, when we curate, and when we evolve those patterns, because they've been used, they've been studied, they've been A/B tested, not A/B tested, but usability tested in real tools that are used in production, we can then really amplify what works. It's kind of our collective brain as designers. But again, this is a very nerdy way of introducing patterns and talking about design system, because I can't not say that to my top management, because they will be looking at me like, amplifying collective brain, what? So the way we talk about business patterns is we reduce cost, we reduce entropy, because we don't want many ways of doing FYI checks, we just want one that works, and people are used to, so they can do it more efficiently after, and reducing time to market. I was presenting this one day, and my CEO, Chief Operating Officer, said, oh, okay, I get it. So it's good for design, it's good for the wallet. Great. Just remember this. So again, remember, every interaction we have with stakeholders, it's a way to articulate our value, what we bring in their goals, in the context of their goals. And yeah, it's really currently at the mind of all our top execs. I gave you a share a study that we've done, because then we were thinking, oh, okay, so it does make sense, but how much can we push this? And we did this study, so it's a bit small, so I'll probably just let you take a screenshot and a picture, and I'll comment over it. I asked a designer who started working on a new project to list all the patterns that he could find, and try to list where he would find them elsewhere. And at the end of the day, what he got is basically 80% of the patterns needed for that specific service. So for example, create a cash flow blotter, create an operation page, create an operation timeline. Well, 80% of those use cases were already existing elsewhere that we've designed and tested. So basically, we're saving a lot of time on the research, the prototyping, specification, and testing. Sometimes, again, we still have to implement it differently because the tech stack will be different, but at least this allows us to go faster. I'm not saying that we're going to save 80%. It's just that we can spend more time in what really matters, understanding the problem, and also on the 20% that are specific to that service. So, all right, design systems, they're useful. Top exec are bought into it. But as I said, there's users of the design system. They also need to be convinced, right? And what happened is we realized that for that to work, for this kind of system to work, we kind of had also to change the job definition of designers at my company. What I mean is, I don't know if you can see, it's a bit dark maybe. I don't know if anyone recognized this movie. Anyone recognize it? Yeah, thank you for saying, because I can't pronounce this properly. Groundhog Day. So hard. Jour de la marmotte in French, which is much easier to say to me, but yeah, Groundhog Day. You know, it's this narcissistic character, weatherman, played by Bill Murray, who's like trapped in time, and he has to repeat the same day correctly until he gets it right. Well, when I heard those comments, creativity, I can't practice my art, can I have a greenfield project? I was like, whoa, that reminds me of some people I know, some designers I know. And as I said, I think really when we change the nature of the conversation or what design system brings into an organization, the impact is we change how we work, and the impact is we change the nature and the job desk of our designers. I called it the 5-stage grief of design systems for designers. Denial first. Man, no, that's all this I heard for real. That's not for me. Design system comes with too many constraints. Then there's anger. This is the death of creativity. I could argue that, yeah, fair enough. A lot of product and UX designers come from a more visual background. So it's kind of, like we're taking away what they really liked, iterating in design tools. Because, yeah, it's true, today we spend a lot less time in design tools than we used to do in the past. Yeah, so that's why depression, what's the point? I'm just pushing pixels anyway. But then you go into bargaining mode. And I still sometimes have it. Can I use it and fork it? And I'm like, do you realize this is like anti-design system? Like, when you fork, then how are you gonna get the new releases and everything? But yeah, then I'm like, oh, they're bargaining. Okay, it's fine. And then wait till they reach acceptance, which is, oh wait, this can be great. Because again, as I said, and I guess this is where we've kind of embedded the mission of organization into the job of our designers. The job of designer is not being busy or kept having fun in Figma, is to help us build services on a business platform. It's a platform, therefore it has to be systemic. And this is how we say that basically design's mission isn't to be art, it's to solve problems. But really changing the nature of the conversation, saying, okay, we are designing for the platform. You're not designing for your service. You're not even designing for your page or your that specific feature. Kind of really help people understand that we're changing this way of thinking, that we are trying to be more declarative and not, the former way of thinking. Again, should designers do business design patterns? Should business design pattern be in design system? I guess that could be a whole lot of a new talk and lots of arguments here. But at this point, it works. So it gets us funding. So I'll take it. All right, changing along the way. This one is an interesting one because how do you know when it's time to change how you do something at work? Because for us, as you've seen, we started maybe in 2016 by having maybe 10 services, mostly trading application, pre-trade, post-trade application. And then we grew to have around 130 services, 2020. We added a lot of other services, such as risk management tool, cash management tool, etc. And actually today, we're kind of like the extended Marvel universe. Our design system is used by other entities across the organization who are not CIB, so not corporate investment banking. And so we have to support many more products in the company. And obviously, when you're just servicing 10 services, you can't do it the same way when you have so many other services that you don't even know who else is using your design system. So yeah, coming back to my question, how do you know it's time to change? When it gets unsustainable like this, hopefully you don't wait till it's very bad. But I found out there's a constant thread is basically listening to people who complain is a good indication. Because at some point when we grew, it was just not possible. People who were working on the design system were telling me, I'm getting messages from morning to evening, then emails and tickets on the repo. It's we can't do that. And I really like this quote from Amy, who's around here in somewhere. But she says, by learning how to change design system, we create design system that can change. And it's not just changing the content of the design system, the technology, yes, the design tool, but it's also changing things like the governance. Because talking about governance, I think I mentioned we changed 3 times the tech stack, 2 design tools. We also changed, at the end of the day, we changed 4 times the governance. So when we started, again, the team was so small, the design team was so small, we could decide all together. We were always like basically discussing a topic, everyone's happy, decisions made, great. Then people started to complain because the team grew, and basically people were like, this is not an efficient use of my time because we have to decide everything all together. It's just not efficient. So we actually moved into a benevolent dictatorship. What it means is we decided, okay, some of you will decide for everyone else. You'll be in charge of the design system. I guess this is probably the closest we went into having a design system team. Because guess what? This worked well for a while, but as we kind of started to have more and more services, people started complaining again. Because now they felt that they were left out of any decision process, that they were not consulted, they were not represented. So we changed again. We said, okay, so we're gonna decentralize the workforce. People are gonna basically each, I would say, entity will basically contribute a design system contributor, and this is gonna work. Until you guess what? I didn't. Because what happened is initially people were very enthusiastic, they allocated time to do it. But, then life happened, projects happen, emergency happens. So basically design system was always that thing that was like deprioritized against the other thing. And yeah, I can agree that, when there's an emergency issue on a project, probably the project takes over because there's a time-bound deadline here. So yeah, this started not to work anymore. And so today, and we're still on that actually setup, we have something that we call a shared design system council. And the idea is not to go back to a team setup because again, we wanted people to feel represented, but we have people who are in charge, who are part of the council, who are more in charge of making the things move forward, and they have time allocated in the job description or at the job. They know that they need at least to have 1 day or half day dedicated to the design system. But then everyone else can be a contributor. And so basically they will be kind of the advocate for those contributors, making sure that they have all what they need, that they can contribute, for example, the business design pattern, that they know how to contribute. And so they are kind of making all this happen in the background. So in essence, changing tech stack, changing design tool, changing governance. Actually, I'm not even sure if we have the same design system or not. And I don't know if people are familiar with this thing that you usually learn at school called the ship of Theseus. Philosophy class, anyone? Okay, so I kind of forgot about it as well, but just as a refresher, it's a thought experiment for the ship of Theseus, which is if you change one building block of a ship, at which point does it start to become a new ship? Yeah, people are like, So what I mean by design system is, if you change the tech stack, you change the design tool, you change the people actually working on it, do you have to rebrand? Do you have to make it a new name every time you work on the design system? So for us, design system is more, as I said, a way of working. It's a concept. We don't really care who are working. I mean, I do care who works on it, but the idea is it's fine not having a consistent, team working on it or consistent tech stack because tech changes. And we don't have to build new ships everywhere. We just keep the same name, the HD design system all along. And we have to learn to change along the way. So I guess one thought I will leave you with today, and it's hard because obviously we want to belong. We want, when we see cool stuff being done online, we also, let me try this. But actually, I would say probably do what works for you, even if it's not what you read online. If you've done enough research, you have enough insight to make that decision, then yeah, you don't have to tick things off the checklist. Look at me. I'm here, I tick none of those things. I'm still talking to you guys. But yeah, and you don't have to feel bad about it because again, yeah, we also want to prove that we're doing the things right. So when we're not doing it, I know that it's not that easy and you can feel like you're not, at par. I mean, I clearly remember back in the days, one day someone told me, wait, so you're not working on Mac? I'm sorry, you're not a designer. But I was like, that's not on my checklist, I'm fine. But sorry, so what I say, do what works for you. Don't be ashamed if you don't check those things. So again, coming back to design system, because I feel I've been too philosophical here, to get adoption in your context, even if it's mean not having a brand name, not naming things like the other experts, but naming things so that people understand what you want. To do what works for you to align with your goals, the organization's goal. Again, adapting the conversation here, like we did in shifting our efforts and not talking about UI elements, but business patterns. And do what works for you to work at this very specific moment of your journey. I know that very often when we look at things that are done with like teams who have like 100 contributors, we can be sometimes feeling, oh, I'm alone, or things like that, or like we're a small team. But you don't need to have to do like them. If it works for you, if it works in the context of your organization at that very specific moment of your journey, that's all good. You don't have to feel ashamed about that. Again, we changed governance 4 times. And I'm not saying that we're not going to change again, that we're not going to use token at some point. But I mean, when we do it, we will know that because we will have made the study, we will have discussed, that will be the right moment, right decision at that moment for us. So if you want to hear more rumblings about what we do, complex design and design system, we have this is the self-plug moment, you've seen it. We have a Medium blog. I also want to, if you haven't started listening to Amy's podcast, I also want to shout out to Amy's podcast here, which is great because when we work at systemic level, what we do is even more important because you can introduce harm without even knowing it. And yeah, there's lots of great episodes already released, so you can have a look as well. And as for me, I'm Morgane, so thank you very much. You can find me on Twitter. I mean, all the usuals. Thank you.